Captain Lee Dae-ho stood on the bridge of the human defense station New Seoul, watching the massive alien fleet approach through the void. The screens showed thousands of ships moving toward human space, like a dark cloud covering the stars. Each ship was bigger than anything humanity had ever built, and there were so many of them that they blocked out entire sections of the galaxy. The Vorthon Empire had been expanding across the galaxy for 300 years. They were like a giant monster that ate everything in its path. No species had ever stopped them before. They would arrive at a star system, demand surrender, and if anyone refused, they would destroy everything. The Vorthons were known across the galaxy as the ultimate predators. Lee Dae-ho had been waiting for this moment his entire career. He was 42 years old and had spent 20 years in the Human Defense Force. He had studied every battle the Vorthons had ever fought. He knew their tactics, their weapons, and their weaknesses better than almost anyone alive. Today, all that knowledge would be put to the test. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Everyone knew what was coming. Lieutenant Park, Soo-min, monitored the long-range sensors. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls as she tracked the movement of the alien fleet. Commander Kim Yoon-ah studied the tactical displays, planning defensive strategies that might buy them precious time. Chief Engineer Bang Min-woo checked and double-checked all the station systems, making sure everything was ready. Admiral Park Ji-woo's voice crackled through the communications array. The old admiral was broadcasting on all frequencies so that every ship in both fleets could hear his words. "This is Admiral Park of the Terran Defense Force. You are approaching the boundary of human territory. We have marked this line clearly in all galactic charts. Turn back now or face the consequences." The response came quickly from the Vorthon flagship, a vessel so large it looked like a small moon floating in space. The alien voice was cold and mechanical, translated by computers but still carrying the arrogance that had made the Vorthons feared across the galaxy. "Primitive humans, your species is young and weak. Your warning means nothing to the mighty Vorthon Empire. We take what we want, and we want your worlds, Lee." Dae-ho felt his jaw tighten. He had expected this response, but it still made him angry. The Vorthons thought humans were just another weak species that would roll over and surrender like all the others. They had no idea what they were about to face. Commander Kim Yoon-ah looked up from her tactical station. "Captain, the alien fleet is continuing forward. They show no signs of slowing down or changing course. The lead ships will cross into human space in approximately 6 hours. 6 hours, Lee Dae-ho thought to himself. 6 hours, until the most important moment in human history. He walked over to the main viewing screen and stared. Out at the approaching fleet, the Vorthons had conquered the Altarian Republic in 3 days. They had destroyed the Kepler Federation in less than a week. The mighty Centauri civilization had lasted exactly 10 days against them. But the Vorthons did not understand humans. They thought all species were the same. They believed that superior technology and overwhelming numbers were enough to win any war. They had never faced a species that refused to give up, no matter how bad things looked for. 50 years humanity had been preparing for this moment. They had studied every species the Vorthons had conquered. They had analyzed every battle, every tactic, every weapon. The human government had spent enormous amounts of money and resources, getting ready for the day when the Empire would finally reach Earth. The preparation had not been easy. Many people had questioned whether it was worth the cost. Some had argued that humanity should try to make peace with the Vorthons. Others had suggested that humans should just run away and find new worlds far from the Empire. But the leaders of Earth had made a different choice. They had decided to draw a line in the stars and defend it. Lee Dae-ho remembered the day the decision was made. He had been a young lieutenant then, serving on a patrol ship near the outer colonies. The news had spread quickly through the fleet. Humanity would not run. They would not surrender. They would stand and fight no matter what the cost. The captain turned. To his communications officer, Lieutenant Cho Hye-jin, send a message to all human colonies. Tell them the Vorthons have crossed the line. Tell them Operation Thunderstrike is now active. Operation Thunderstrike was the code name for humanity's secret defense plan. For 50 years, human scientists, engineers, and military strategists had worked together to create something the galaxy had never seen before. They had built hidden weapons, developed new tactics, and formed secret alliances that even the Vorthons did not know about. The plan was risky and dangerous. Many people would die before it was over. But it was humanity's only chance to survive as a free species. The alternative was slavery or extinction, and neither option was acceptable. To the people of Earth, Lieutenant Park Soo-min looked up from her sensor station. "Captain, I am detecting unusual activity in the outer system. It looks like ships are moving, but I cannot identify them on long range." Sensors. Lee. Daeho smiled grimly. "Those are our ships," he said. "They have been waiting in the asteroid fields and nebulae for years, hidden from Vorthon scouts. Now they are moving into position. The Vorthons thought they were facing only the few dozen ships they could see around the defense stations. They had no idea that humanity had been playing a much longer game. The real human fleet was scattered across hundreds of systems, hidden and waiting for the right moment to strike." Chief Engineer Bang Min-woo checked his instruments. "Again, Captain, all systems are ready. The new weapons are online and functioning perfectly. The shield generators are running at maximum efficiency. We are as ready as we will ever be." The new weapons were humanity's secret advantage. For decades, human scientists had studied captured Vorthon technology. They had found weaknesses that even the Empire did not know existed. The weapons looked primitive compared to alien technology, but they were designed specifically to exploit those weaknesses. Commander Kim Yuna pulled up a tactical display showing the positions of both fleets. "Captain, the Vorthons are deploying into their standard attack formation. They are not taking any special precautions. They seem to think this will be another easy victory." That was exactly what Lee Dae-ho had hoped for. The Vorthons had grown overconfident after centuries of easy conquests. They expected every species to fight the same way using the same tactics. The idea that humanity might have developed something completely different had never occurred to them. The captain looked around his bridge at the men and women who would help decide the fate of humanity. They were scared, he could see it in their eyes. But they were also determined. None of them would back down. From this fight, they all understood what was at stake. In 6 hours, the Vorthon fleet would enter human space, and the greatest battle in galactic history would begin. Humanity had drawn a line in the stars, and now they would find out if they were strong enough to defend it. The Empire had made their choice and crossed the line anyway. Now they would learn why that was a mistake. Lee Dae-ho took one last look at the approaching alien fleet, then turned to his crew. "Send the final message to Earth Command," he ordered. "Tell them the dice are cast. The war begins now." The Vorthon fleet moved deeper into human space like a pack of hungry wolves expecting easy prey. Their first target was the mining colony on Kepler 442b, a small world with 50,000 human civilians. The planet looked defenseless from orbit, with only a few small defense platforms and patrol ships protecting it. Supreme Commander Vextar studied the tactical displays on his flagship bridge. The human colony appeared exactly like all the others his empire had conquered over the centuries. A few desperate defenders, a terrified population, and no real chance of victory. He had seen this pattern hundreds of times before. Vextar was over 200 years old and had personally led the conquest of 47 different star systems. He was tall, even for a Vorthon, standing nearly 3 meters high, with 4 arms and skin like gray metal. His red eyes glowed with the confidence of someone who had never truly been defeated in battle. "Begin the attack," he commanded his fleet. The standard pattern. Apply overwhelming force and demand immediate surrender. Any resistance will be crushed quickly and completely. The Vorthan ships opened fire with weapons that could crack continents. Their energy beams and missile salvos had destroyed countless. Worlds before today should be no different. The alien commanders expected the human defenders to either flee in terror or surrender immediately, but something unexpected happened instead. Captain Choi Min-ho led a squadron of small human fighters that darted between the massive alien ships like angry insects. His pilots flew with desperate courage, using tactics the Vorthons had never encountered before. Instead of fighting in formation like civilized species, the humans scattered and attacked. From every direction at once. The human fighters were tiny compared to Vorthan warships, but they moved with incredible speed and agility. They targeted specific weak points that should have been impossible for primitive species to know about, yet. Somehow, these humans had found vulnerabilities in Vorthon's ship design that even the Empire engineers did not fully understand. Lieutenant Yang Sung-ho piloted his fighter straight at a Vorthon cruiser 10 times his size. Instead of firing at the heavily armored front sections, he aimed for the small sensor array near the ship engine. The explosion that followed was much bigger than it should have been. The entire cruiser went dark and began drifting helplessly through space. "How is this possible?" Vextar demanded from his flagship bridge. "These primitive weapons should not be able to penetrate our shields." Yet ship after ship was reporting damage from attacks that made no tactical sense. Dr. Song Hyejin watched the battle from deep underground, in the colony emergency bunkers. She was one of the lead scientists who had spent 15 years studying every piece of Vorthan technology that humans could get their hands on. Her research team had discovered something amazing about alien energy systems. The Vorthans built everything to be as powerful as possible, but that created weaknesses they never expected. If you hit their power conduits at exactly the right frequency, with exactly the right type of energy pulse, the feedback would overload their entire electrical system. It was like finding the perfect spot to hit a giant that would make him fall down. The real surprise came when Vorthon ground forces finally landed on the planet's surface. They expected to find terrified civilians running. In panic, like every other species they had conquered, instead they found empty cities and abandoned buildings. Every human on the planet had simply vanished. Colonel Park Sung-woo led the Vorthan ground assault with 5,000 elite soldiers. They had conquered dozens of worlds using the same proven tactics: land quickly, secure key locations, and round up the population for processing. But there was no population to round up. The cities looked like everyone had just disappeared overnight. Food was still on tables in restaurants. Children toys were scattered in playgrounds, but there were no people anywhere. The Vorthons searched building after building, finding nothing but empty rooms and strange echoing sounds. Underground, Lieutenant Bang. Sujin crouched in a tunnel system that stretched for hundreds of kilometers beneath the colony. Every human civilian had been moved into these hidden passages months ago, along with enough supplies to last for years. The tunnels had been built, in secret, using mining equipment to carve out a second city beneath the first. The tunnel network was like a giant anthill, with passages connecting every part of the colony. Emergency exits led to hidden locations far from the main settlements. Supply depots were scattered throughout the system, stocked with food, water, weapons, and medical equipment. The humans had turned their entire world into one massive fortress. Bang Soo-jin led her squad of volunteers through the tunnels toward their first target. A Vorthan command post had been set up in the old mining administration building. The aliens thought they were safe because they controlled the surface, but they had no idea what was happening beneath their feet. Her soldiers moved quietly through the dark passages using night vision equipment and sound dampeners. They had trained for this mission for over 2 years, learning every tunnel, every intersection, every emergency route. The underground network was their home field advantage. The attack came from below, exactly where the Vorthans never expected it. Explosive charges had been placed under key buildings months in advance. All Bang Soo-jin had to do was trigger them at the right moment. The command post disappeared in a ball. of fire taking most of the alien communication equipment with it. Similar attacks happened all across the colony. Vorthan soldiers found themselves fighting an enemy they could not see. Humans would appear from hidden tunnels, attack quickly, and then vanish back underground before the aliens could respond. Every corridor became a potential trap. Every room a possible ambush. Major Kim Tae-hyun coordinated the underground resistance from a command center buried deep beneath the colony main spaceport. His communication network allowed resistance fighters across the planet to work together like a single organism, attacking alien positions in coordinated waves. The Vorthons had expected to conquer the colony in a few hours. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a nightmare of guerrilla warfare that they did not understand. Every time they thought they had secured an area, new attacks would come from directions that should have been impossible. After 3 days of fighting, Vextar received reports that made his blood cold. Other human colonies were fighting back with the same impossible tactics. What should have been easy conquests had turned into costly battles that were draining his fleet strength. The colony on Ross 128b had somehow hidden its entire population in underground ice caves. The defenders on Wolf 359C were using weapons that seemed specifically designed to counter Vortan technology. Every human world was fighting with a desperation and cleverness that the Empire had never encountered before. Captain Lee Won-suk reported from the front lines on Kepler 442b, Commander. We have lost over 30% of our ground forces. The humans are using the planet itself as a weapon. They know every hiding place, every tunnel, every weakness in our positions. Vextar stared at the tactical displays showing casualty reports from across human space. This was not how conquests were supposed to work. When the Empire arrived, species were supposed to surrender or die quickly. Instead, these humans were making every meter of ground cost blood. The Supreme Commander realized he had made a serious mistake. He had assumed humans would be like every other species, weak, frightened, and easily broken, but instead, he had found fighters who refused to give up no matter how hopeless their situation appeared. Recall all ground forces, he ordered. We will bombard these worlds from orbit until nothing remains alive. These humans want to fight from their holes. We will bury them in those holes. But even as he gave the order, Vextar knew something had changed. The easy conquest he had expected was turning into a real war. And for the first time in his long career, he was beginning to wonder if the Vortan Empire might have finally met an enemy that would not break. Captain Oh Sung-woo commanded the stealth ship Incheon's Pride, hidden in the shadow of a massive asteroid field. His vessel was invisible to most sensors using technology that humanity had developed specifically for spying on the Vorthan Empire. For 6 months he had been watching and waiting for this exact moment. The ship was small, with a crew of only 20 people, but it carried the most advanced surveillance equipment that human science could build. Every conversation, every transmission, every movement of the Vorthan fleet was being recorded and analyzed. The information would be crucial for what was coming next. Oh Sung-woo was 38 years old and had spent his entire adult life in the intelligence service. He spoke 7 alien languages and had visited more than 40 different worlds, always in secret, always gathering information about the Empire enemies. He was one of the few humans who truly understood how big the galaxy was. Lieutenant Commander Shin Hae-won monitored the long-range sensors from her station. Her fingers danced across the controls as she tracked incoming ships. The readings made her heart race with excitement. "Captain, you need to see this immediately." The sensor display showed a massive fleet approaching from the opposite direction, heading straight for the Vorthan forces. But these were not human ships. The vessels bore the markings of species that everyone thought had been crushed by the Empire years ago, the Kepler Federation. Ships moved in tight formations, their hulls gleaming with advanced armor. The Centauri Republic fleet spread out in a defensive pattern that protected their larger vessels. The insectoid hive collective swarmed forward in groups that looked like clouds of angry metal wasps. Oh Sung-woo stared at the display in amazement. He had known about the secret alliance, but seeing it in person was something completely different. The combined fleet was enormous, larger than anything the galaxy had seen. In living memory, ship after ship after ship, stretching across light years of space. This was the result of 5 years of secret diplomacy led by Admiral Yoon Tae-young. She had traveled between alien worlds in disguise, meeting with resistance leaders and government officials who had grown tired of Vorthan oppression. Her message had been simple. The Empire would never stop expanding until they controlled everything. Admiral Yoon had started with the Kepler Federation, a proud species of blue-skinned humanoids who had been forced to pay tribute to the Vorthons for decades. Their ships were fast, and their energy weapons were among the best in the galaxy. They had been waiting for someone to give them hope. The Centauri Republic had been harder to convince. They were a cautious species who preferred diplomacy to warfare. But when Admiral Yoon showed them classified intelligence about Vorthan plans to completely enslave their worlds, they realized that fighting was their only choice. Their ships carried shield technology that was almost impossible to penetrate. The biggest surprise was the hive collective nobody had heard from the insectoid species for 20 years after the Vorthans had supposedly wiped them out. But they had been hiding in the deep space between galaxies, building new ships and planning their revenge. Their swarm tactics could overwhelm even the largest enemy vessels. Each species had contributed their best technology and their finest warriors to the alliance. Human adaptability had proved crucial in making all the different systems work together. Engineer Kang Yoon-soo had spent months creating interfaces that allowed alien weapons to be controlled by human computers. The technical challenges had been enormous. Every species used different power systems, different communication protocols, different tactical doctrines. Kang Yoon-soo's team of human engineers had worked with alien scientists to create hybrid technologies that combined the best of all. World ships that looked human on the outside now carried Kepler energy weapons, Centauri shields, and hive collective targeting systems. The result was a fleet that was far more powerful than the sum of its parts. Each vessel could fight with capabilities that no single species could have achieved alone. Commander Park Ji-young studied the tactical data streaming in from the approaching Alliance fleet. The numbers were staggering, over 10,000 ships from 15 different species, all converging. On the Vorthon position, the Empire scouts must be sending panic reports back to their commanders. The Vorthon Empire had never faced anything like this before. In 300 years of conquest, they had always fought one species at a time. They would arrive at a star system, demand surrender, and crush any resistance with overwhelming force. But now half the galaxy was united against them. Supreme Commander Vex Tar received the scout reports on his flagship bridge with growing disbelief. The primitive humans were supposed to be fighting alone. How had they managed to coordinate with so many other species without the Empire intelligence network detecting it? The answer was simple. Admiral Yoon and her team had used the Vorthon's own arrogance against them. The Empire was so confident in their superiority that they never bothered to monitor communications between species they considered harmless. The secret alliance had grown right under their noses. Captain Lim Dong-wook commanded a joint task force of human and Kepler ships. His crews had trained together for months, learning to work as a single unit. Despite coming from completely different worlds, the language barriers had been solved with universal translators, but the cultural differences were harder to overcome. The Keplers were methodical and precise in everything they did. They planned every move carefully and followed orders exactly. Human crews were more flexible and creative, willing to improvise when situations changed. The combination of both approaches made them incredibly effective. Lieutenant Yang Min-kyung worked alongside her Kepler counterpart Zix Ara in the ship's tactical center. The two officers had become friends despite being from different species. They shared the same determination to stop the Vorthon Empire from destroying any more worlds. The Centauri ships moved into position with their advanced defensive systems active. Their shields could absorb enormous amounts of damage while their crews worked to coordinate the battle plan. Every species had different strengths, but they all shared the same goal. The Hive collective vessels swarmed around the larger ships like protective escorts. Their rapid-fire weapons could saturate enemy defenses, while their incredible speed made them almost impossible to target. The insectoids communicated through pheromones, but they had learned to work with other species. Dr. Ryu Sang-woo analyzed the intelligence data from his position aboard the human command ship. The Vorthon fleet was impressive, but it had been designed to fight conventional battles against single species. The Alliance represented something completely new, a multi-species force that could adapt and change tactics instantly. The Empire had grown comfortable with their standard conquest pattern: arrive in overwhelming force, demand, surrender, destroy any resistance, and move on to the next target. But this time, they faced an enemy that had studied their methods and prepared specifically to counter them. Supreme Commander Vextar faced the most difficult decision of his career. He could retreat and admit that the mighty Vorthon Empire had been stopped by a collection of inferior species, or he could call for reinforcements from across the Empire and commit everything to crushing this rebellion. His pride would not let him back down. The Empire had never retreated from any battle in 300 years of conquest. He activated the emergency communication system and sent out calls for every available ship. The largest space battle in galactic history was about to begin. The Alliance fleet continued its approach while the Vorthon commanders scrambled to understand what they were facing. Admiral Yoon smiled grimly from her command ship. The trap had been set perfectly. The Empire had crossed humanity line in the stars, and now they would face the consequences. The galaxy held its breath as two massive fleets prepared for battle. Everything that had happened before was just the beginning. The real test of the Alliance was about to begin. The battle for humanity's survival began in the Proxima system, where both fleets met in a clash that lit up the darkness of space like a new star being born. The combined Alliance fleet faced the largest Vorthon armada ever assembled with ships. Stretching across millions of kilometers of void, Colonel Nam Ho-seok led the human vanguard aboard his ship Busan's Hammer, a heavy cruiser that had been modified with alien technology. His crew was a mix of humans and Kepler volunteers, all trained to work together as a single fighting unit. They charged directly at the Vorthon flagship, knowing they might not survive the encounter. The opening moments of battle were chaos beyond imagination. Thousands of ships firing at once created a light show that could be seen from neighboring star systems. Energy beams crossed the void like deadly rainbows, while missile swarms darkened space with their numbers. The sound of engines and weapons would have been deafening if sound could travel through. Vacuum Nam Ho-seok watched his tactical display as Vorthon planet-killer weapons charged up. These were the same weapons that had destroyed entire civilizations in the past. Each shot could crack a world in half or boil away an ocean. The Alliance fleet scattered immediately, using evasive patterns they had practiced for months. The Vorthon commanders expected their enemies to break and run when faced with such overwhelming firepower. But instead, the Alliance ships regrouped and attacked from new angles, using tactics that the rigid Empire military could not understand or counter. Effectively, Commander Lee So-young piloted her fighter through the massive battle, weaving between capital ships the size of cities. Her mission was to target the communication arrays on Vorthon command vessels. Without coordination, the alien fleet would fragment into individual ships fighting their own separate battles. Her fighter was tiny compared to the massive warships around her, but it carried weapons. Designed specifically for this mission, human scientists had discovered that Vorthon communication systems used a particular frequency that could be disrupted with the right kind of electromagnetic pulse. Lee So-young dove toward a Vorthon destroyer. Dodging defensive fire that could have vaporized her ship in an instant, she released her special warheads at exactly the right moment and watched as the enemy vessel communication array exploded in a shower of sparks all across the battlefield. Similar attacks were taking place. Alliance fighters targeted the weak points in Vorthon's ship designs, while the larger vessels provided covering fire. The Empire had never faced an enemy that understood their technology so completely on the ground. Major Park Dong-wook defended the last human stronghold on New Hanseong. The planet had been under siege for weeks, but the defenders refused to surrender. Vorthan ground forces had finally broken through the outer defenses, but they found humans, who would rather die than give up. The city had been turned into a fortress over the course of years. Every building was a potential strong point, every street a killing zone. The civilian population had been evacuated to underground shelters while volunteer soldiers took their places in prepared defensive positions. Park Dong-wook crouched behind a barricade made from destroyed vehicles watching as Vorthan troops advanced down the main boulevard. His soldiers were outnumbered 10-1, but they had advantages the aliens could not match. They knew every alley, every rooftop, every basement in the city. The fighting was brutal and personal. Each building had to be cleared room by room, floor by floor. The Vorthans had superior weapons and armor, but the humans fought with desperate courage that turned every encounter into a deadly struggle. Sergeant Kim Yeon-soo led her squad through the ruins of the old marketplace, using knowledge of the terrain that only locals could possess. They moved through passages that did not appear on any map, emerging behind enemy positions to attack where the Vorthans least expected it. The tide of battle turned when Dr. Lim Ye-jin activated humanity, greatest secret weapon. For 50 years, human scientists had studied every piece of Vorthon technology they could find. They had discovered something that even the Empire engineers did not fully understand. The Vorthon power systems all use the same basic design principles. This made them incredibly efficient, but it also created a single point of failure that could be exploited. Dr. Lim had developed a computer virus that could spread through their networks and shut down critical systems. The virus was released from hidden transmitters placed throughout human space. It spread through the Vorthan fleet communication networks like wildfire, jumping from ship to ship faster than the aliens could react. Each infected vessel began suffering system failures at the worst possible moment. Captain Young Woo-jin watched from his command bridge as Vorthon ships began going dark all across the battlefield. Engines shut down, weapon systems failed, and life support started flickering. The mighty Empire fleet suddenly found itself helpless in the middle of a battle. The Alliance forces pressed their advantage, attacking the disabled Vorthan vessels with everything they had. Ships that had seemed invincible moments before were now easy targets, drifting helplessly through space as their crews struggled to restore power. But Supreme Commander Vextar was not finished yet. He had one final terrible plan that would ensure victory, even if it meant destroying everything in the system. If he could not conquer the Alliance worlds, he would make sure they could never threaten the Empire again. From his personal dreadnought, Vextar activated the most destructive weapons in the Vorthan arsenal. Planet-killer missiles were launched toward every inhabited world in the system. The warheads were already in flight when Alliance sensors detected them. Admiral Kim Hae-won received the tactical report and felt her blood turn to ice. The missiles were too fast and too numerous to be stopped by conventional defenses. In 30 minutes, every Alliance world in the system would be reduced to lifeless rock. She made the hardest decision of her life, broadcasting on all Alliance frequencies. All ships, this is Admiral Kim. Every available vessel will intercept the planet-killer missiles, ram them if necessary, but do not let them reach our worlds. The response was immediate. Thousands of Alliance ships broke off from the main battle and raced toward the incoming missiles. Their crews knew it was a suicide mission, but they did not hesitate. They had families. On those worlds, children who deserved to see another sunrise Lieutenant Colonel Shin Myung-ho commanded the destroyer Seoul's Vengeance as it intercepted a planet killer heading for Earth. His ship was fast, but the missile was faster. The only way to stop it was to ram it directly with his vessel. The collision created an explosion that lit up space like a miniature sun. The Seoul's Vengeance and its crew of 300 volunteers disappeared in the blast, but the planet killer was destroyed. Earth would live to see another day, all across the system. Similar sacrifices were being made. Alliance ships rammed the deadly missiles, knowing that each successful interception saved millions of lives. The courage of those crews would be remembered. For as long as humans existed, the Vorthon fleet was scattered and broken, their main weapon turned against them by an enemy they had underestimated. But Vextar himself escaped in his heavily armored dreadnought. He broadcast a final message to the entire galaxy. "This is not over," he declared. "The Vorthon Empire spans 1,000 worlds and controls the destiny of countless species. We will return with greater force than you can imagine. Your victory today means nothing." Commander Bei Jin-woo led the cleanup operations, searching through the wreckage for survivors. Both Alliance and Vorthon ships had been destroyed in the battle. The cost had been enormous, but the Alliance had proven something important to the galaxy. The battle had changed. Everything species that had bowed to Vorthon rule for centuries were now openly rebelling. The alliance that had started with humanity was growing stronger every day as more worlds joined the fight for freedom. The line humanity had drawn in the stars was now written in fire and blood across the galaxy. The Vorthon Empire had learned that some boundaries could not be crossed without facing terrible consequences. But everyone knew this was just the beginning of a much larger war. Supreme Commander Vextar stood alone on the bridge of his damaged dreadnought, watching the debris field that had once been the pride of the Vorthon Empire. His fleet was scattered across light years of space, with most ships either destroyed or fleeing in panic. The unthinkable had happened. The mighty empire had been defeated, but Vextar was not ready to accept defeat. He activated the most secret weapon in the Empire arsenal, planet-killer missiles that had been hidden in deep space for over a century. These were not ordinary weapons, but doomsday devices designed to crack worlds apart and boil away their atmospheres. The missiles were already programmed with targets every major world in human space and all the Alliance home planets. If Vextar could not rule the galaxy, then he would make sure that no one else could either. He would turn every rebel world into a lifeless rock floating in space. Captain Young Woo Jin detected the missile launches from his position aboard the Intelligence ship Daegu's Light. His sensors showed dozens of massive warheads racing toward Alliance worlds at incredible speed. Each missile carried enough destructive power to destroy an entire planet. Young Woo Jin immediately transmitted the warning to all Alliance forces, but he knew there was not much time. The missiles would reach their targets in less than 2 hours. The only hope was to intercept them before they could complete their deadly mission. Admiral Kim Hae-won received the intelligence report while coordinating rescue operations in the aftermath of the Great Battle. Her face went pale as she read the tactical analysis. The planet killers were too fast and too well protected for conventional weapons to stop them. She opened a communication channel to every ship in the Alliance fleet. "All vessels, this is Admiral Kim. We face the gravest threat in galactic history. Vorthon planet-killer missiles are heading for our worlds. The only way to stop them is direct collision. Volunteers step forward." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of ship captains volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. They would ram their vessels into the incoming missiles, knowing that the collision would destroy both the warhead and their own ship. Lieutenant Colonel Shin Myung-ho commanded the heavy cruiser Seoul's Vengeance when he received the call for volunteers. His ship carried a crew of 400 brave souls, all of whom voted unanimously to accept the mission. They had families on Earth and would do anything to protect them. The Soul's vengeance accelerated toward the planet killer heading for Earth. Its engines pushed beyond their safety limits. The crew worked frantically to extract maximum speed from their vessel, knowing that every second counted in the race to save their home world. Captain Lee Min-jung piloted the destroyer Busan's Pride toward another missile aimed at the Kepler Federation homeworld. Her ship was smaller and faster, but the physics of the interception were brutal. She would have to hit the warhead at exactly the right angle to ensure complete destruction. All across Space Alliance ships raced toward their targets, leaving behind everything they had ever known. The crews recorded final messages to their families, knowing these would be the last words their loved ones would ever hear from them. The first interception came when Commander Park Soo-jin rammed her frigate into a missile heading for the Centauri Republic capital. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away, a brief new star that burned brightly before fading into darkness. The planet below was saved, but the frigate and its crew were gone. One by one, the Alliance ships found their targets and made the ultimate sacrifice. The Soul's vengeance collided with the Earth-bound missile in a blast that lit up the solar system. Lieutenant Colonel Shin Myung-ho and his crew became heroes, whose names would be remembered forever. Captain Lee Min-jung succeeded in destroying the missile aimed at the Kepler homeworld, but her ship was caught in the explosion. The Busan's Pride broke apart in the blast, but the Kepler Federation would survive to fight another day. Not all the interceptions were successful. 3 planet killers reached their targets before Alliance ships could stop them. The mining world of Kepler 186f was cracked in half its population of 2 million people lost in an instant. The Centauri research station on Wolf 1061c simply vanished in a ball of nuclear fire. The Hive Collective lost their secret base in the Trappist system when a missile found its target. The insectoid species mourned their dead in ways that other species could barely understand, but their determination to fight the Empire only grew stronger. Admiral Kim Hae-won watched the tactical displays as the final interceptions took place. The cost had been terrible. Over 50 Alliance ships destroyed, thousands of volunteers dead, entire populations lost. But the majority of their worlds had been saved. The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. Supreme Commander Vexatar had escaped with the remnants of his personal fleet. He would return to the Empire core worlds and rally support for a new campaign. The Alliance had won this battle, but they had also made an enemy that would never forgive them. Commander Bae Jin-woo led the search and rescue operations looking for survivors in the wreckage of the great battle his teams found. Escape pods from both Alliance and Vorthon ships. The enemy survivors were treated with the same care as Alliance personnel. This decision caused controversy among some Alliance members who wanted revenge for the planet killer attacks. But Admiral Kim Hae-won insisted that the Alliance would not become like the Empire. They would show mercy even to their enemies. Dr. Ryu Min-kyung analyzed the aftermath from her laboratory on Mars. The battle had cost the Alliance over 200 ships and nearly 50,000 lives, but it had accomplished something that many thought impossible. It had proven that the Vorthon Empire could be defeated. The news of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself through networks of traders, smugglers, and rebels on worlds where the Empire flag flew. Species that had been enslaved for generations began to whisper about freedom. The Altarian Republic, which had been conquered by the Vorthons decades ago, began planning their own rebellion. The Rigel Confederacy started building secret weapons. The Tau Ceti colonies began training resistance fighters in hidden camps. Captain Oh Seung-woo continued his intelligence-gathering missions deep in Empire territory. His stealth ship brought back reports of growing unrest on Vorthon worlds. The Empire was facing rebellions on dozens of fronts as news of their defeat continued to spread. The economic cost of the battle was enormous as well. The Alliance had spent decades building their secret fleet, and most of it was now floating debris in space. They would need to rebuild everything while also defending against the Empire. Inevitable counterattack engineer Kang Yun-soo worked around the clock to design new ships that could be built quickly and cheaply. The Alliance needed to replace their losses as fast as possible while also incorporating lessons learned from the Great Battle. The political situation was complex as well. Some Alliance members wanted to press their advantage and attack Empire worlds immediately. Others argued for a defensive strategy that would let them rebuild their strength while the Empire dealt with internal rebellions. Ambassador Han Ji-hyun traveled between Alliance worlds trying to hold the coalition. Together the victory had been won, but maintaining unity among so many different species with different goals and cultures was an ongoing challenge. The human government on Earth faced difficult decisions about how to proceed. They had drawn a line in the stars and successfully defended it, but now they were committed to a galactic war that could last for decades. Public opinion on human worlds was mixed. Some people celebrated the victory and called for more aggressive action against the Empire. Others worried about the cost in lives and resources of continuing the fight. Lieutenant Park Soo-min returned to Earth on medical leave after being wounded in the battle. She found a world that had changed dramatically. People who had never thought much about alien species now followed galactic news closely. Everyone understood that humanity was part of something much larger. The memorial services for the volunteers who had sacrificed themselves to stop the planet killers drew millions of attendees. Their names were carved into monuments on every Alliance world. Children learned about their courage in school. Supreme Commander Vexistar reached the Empire capital world of Vorthak Prime with the surviving ships from his fleet. He found a government in crisis with different factions arguing about how to respond to the unprecedented defeat. Some Empire leaders called for an immediate massive counterattack using every ship and soldier the Empire could muster. Others suggested negotiating with the Alliance to end the conflict before it destroyed both sides. Vextar himself favored the most extreme option. He wanted to activate the Empire Ultimate Weapon, a device that could destroy entire star systems. He argued that the Alliance had to be completely eliminated to preserve Empire power. The debate would continue for months while both sides prepared for the next phase of the war. The line humanity had drawn in the stars had held, but the real test was still to come. 5 years after the Great Battle, the galaxy was a completely different place. Captain Ro Tae-jin commanded the new starship United Earth, the flagship of the Galactic Defense Alliance. The massive vessel represented everything humanity had learned about working with other species to build something greater than any single world could achieve alone. The ship itself was a miracle of cooperation. Human engineering combined with Kepler energy systems, Centauri defensive technology, and Hive collective communication networks. The crew of 3,000 included representatives from over 20 different species, all working together toward common goals. Where once the Vorten Empire had ruled through fear and oppression, now dozens of species worked, together as equals. The old Empire borders had been replaced by zones of cooperation where trade, science, and culture flowed freely between worlds. The former Vorthan worlds were slowly being liberated by Alliance forces. Many of the alien soldiers, who had once served the Empire, now fought alongside their former enemies. They had learned that freedom was better than the fear and hatred that the Empire had taught them. General Seo Young-min led joint operations where humans, Kepler's Centaurians, and even reformed Vorthans served in the same units. The integration had not been easy. Many species held grudges from centuries of Empire oppression, but slowly trust was being built through shared missions and common sacrifice. The liberation campaigns were careful and methodical. The Alliance had learned from their earlier battles that victory was not just about destroying enemy forces, but also about building something better to replace what had been torn down. Each freed world required massive reconstruction efforts. Alliance engineering teams worked to repair damage from decades of Empire exploitation. New governments had to be established, trade relationships rebuilt, and populations relocated from forced labor camps back to their original. Home's ambassador Han Ji-hyun worked tirelessly to bring more species into the Alliance. Her diplomatic missions reached out to worlds on the far edge of the galaxy, spreading the message that freedom was possible. The Empire grip on power was weakening everywhere. Some species were easier to convince than others. The Procyon Federation joined the Alliance immediately after seeing what had happened to the Vorthon fleet. The Vega Commonwealth took months of negotiation before agreeing to provide support. The distant Andromeda colonies remained neutral but opened trade relationships. The Alliance had grown from the original 5 species to over 40 different civilizations. Each new member brought their own strengths and challenges. Integration required constant work to prevent misunderstandings and conflicts between groups with very different cultures. But Supreme Commander Vexitar was still out there somewhere, gathering the remaining loyal forces for one final assault. Intelligence reports suggested he was building new superweapons in hidden bases beyond the galactic rim. The Alliance could not rest until the threat was completely eliminated. Commander Moon Si-Ri led scouting missions into the unknown regions, searching for Vexitar secret bases. Her ship, the Dagu's Light, carried the most advanced stealth technology the Alliance could build. The hunt for the Empire, remnants continued across unexplored star systems. The deep space missions were dangerous and lonely. Moon Si-Ri crew spent months at a time in the void between galaxies following faint energy signatures and garbled transmissions. They found abandoned Empire facilities, research stations, and weapons testing sites. Each discovery provided more pieces of the puzzle. Vexitar was not just building conventional weapons, but experimenting with technologies that could threaten entire galactic regions. The Alliance intelligence services worked around the clock to understand what they were facing. Dr. Song Hae-jin continued her research into Vorthon technology, but now she worked openly with scientists from dozens of different species. The combined knowledge base was enormous, allowing breakthrough discoveries that no single civilization could have achieved. The new technologies being developed were not just weapons, but tools for exploration, terraforming, medical treatment, and communication. The Alliance was becoming more than a military organization. It was evolving into a true galactic civilization. Captain Lee Dae-ho now served as an instructor at the new Alliance Naval Academy on Luna, where officers from every member species learned to work together. The academy was a symbol of how much things had changed. Young beings from across the galaxy studied. Side by side, the curriculum included not just military tactics and technology, but also diplomacy,